today. Okay, so, as I said, welcome. I'm going to move on to the aims of today. So as you can see there, we've got a range of areas to cover, and as we go through, please in the chat, put any questions that you may have. We are here afterwards if you want to stop and ask us a question, face to face or one-on-one. So please make sure you make the most of that opportunity. I'm joined today by a range of colleagues. I'm joined today by Lisa Cassidy, who's the Deputy Director of the Teaching School Hub. I'm Amanda Griffiths, the Director of the Teaching School Hub, who has been designated to lead NPQs across Lincolnshire. And I'm joined by our partner and colleague, Helen Barker, who will be sharing some of the information and leading some of the input today. And Andy Chisholm from the Priories Academy Trust, with a quick wave at the screen there, who again is one of our partners in leading the NPQs across our region. So I'm going to move on. So today I just want to share a bit of background really about the NPQs and how it's constructed. You can see here on the screen that we as partners and the Lead Teaching School Hub together have chosen a lead provider to deliver the NPQs across Lincolnshire. And we have chosen to work with Education Development Trust simply because, we did so much due diligence, working with a range of lead providers, but felt that for our region, this gave us the most flexibility to tailor it to the range of schools and needs within our county. And it had that robust evidence base, as you can see on your screen, in relation to Sheffield Hallam, that really underpinned the NPQs, so we knew that they would be of high quality in terms of what we would be delivering. So you've heard so much about the golden thread, I'm sure, through many different routes in terms of the Teaching School Hub and the Teaching School Hub landscape, about how it really is about developing people, right from their initial teacher training start to their journey in their career, right through to executive leadership. Obviously, the NPQs fit within this journey, and I think it's really important to recognise this isn't just replicating the past, that these NPQs are different and they have been reformed, and we're going to come on to those differences in a moment. So just before we kind of dive into the detail, really, I think it's really important to recognise that as a teacher, a leader, you're constantly giving to the profession, giving to children, giving to parents, giving to colleagues. And actually, this is an opportunity to fill that bucket up for teachers and leaders and really develop people so that you have that skill set to make a difference to children ultimately. So it's a case of really knowing the staff team or knowing yourself as a leader and knowing which NPQ is the best to embark upon, so that you maximise, I suppose, the impact at the other end and obviously the impact upon pupils. So I'm going to hand over now to Helen to share the changes to the NPQ suite.
Thanks, Amanda. Okay, so I'm sure all of this is pretty familiar to you, but just to draw out some kind of headlines from the changes. So previously, you will be aware of the NPQ for middle leadership, SL headship and executive leadership. That NPQ for middle leadership has now been replaced by the 3 specialist NPQs. And I'd just like to emphasise and make explicit the specialist nature of those NPQs. So this isn't the same in terms of a linear progression from ML to SL. You may have colleagues in your senior leadership teams or senior colleagues, heads of departments, etc. Possibly also colleagues who have done NPQ SL or even H previously. They still might be potential candidates for the 3 specialist NPQs. The 3 specialists are leading teacher development, leading teaching and curriculum, and leading behaviour and culture. And in a few slides' time, we'll go through some of the key differences between those 3 programmes. The leading teacher development is the one to particularly highlight as that's one that's fully funded for all schools. And it's certainly an aspiration of the DFE that all schools over time will have at least one member of their team qualified with the leading teacher development. And going back to that golden thread, you know, it's clear how somebody with leading teacher development may have responsibilities in supporting ITT and ECTs as well. Yeah, thanks, Lisa. I've forgotten who's got control of the slides. Somebody has. It's not me. Thank you. And then also just to note the changes in assessment. So previously, again, all participants in one of the NPQs would have had a school improvement project lasting at least 2 terms, and then a written final submission based on that school improvement project against the DFE assessment framework. That's now changed. It's a summative assessment in nature. And following either 12 months or 18 months of participation on the programmes, the specialist NPQs are 12 months and the leadership NPQs are 18 months. Following that participation, there's a 3-month assessment window, there's just 8 days to complete a summative assessment, which is a 1,500-word case study based on the learning and the DFE framework, the curriculum content of each of those programmes. So there isn't the same requirement to have the 2-term school improvement project. Through the course of the programmes, there'll be many opportunities for practicing implementation of what's being learned, of activities and commitments to be fulfilled in school. However, they don't need to be linked to a single school improvement priority or leadership area. Okay, over to Lisa.
Morning, colleagues. So just have a look at the actual overview of the professional qualifications. Both the leadership and the specialist NPQs are divided into blocks, 4 blocks for the leadership and 5 for the specialist. Both leadership and specialists start with block 1, focusing on leading improvement. From there, the leadership blocks move into those 3 layers of influence that leaders have in school, looking at the school culture, the organisational conditions that bring that culture to life, and then on into the classroom and how these conditions can promote excellent teaching in every classroom across the school. With regards to the specialist NPQs, once you've moved from block 1, the practitioners on the programme are supported towards mastering the relevant expertise, gaining the knowledge and tools to develop others and extend their influence beyond their actual classroom. If we move on to look at the actual design of the NPQs, you'll see that all the NPQs will start with an introductory video from experts, and then participants will be asked to complete a diagnostic assessment, which will really drill down into where any gaps or misconceptions are, that you can then make your journey through the NPQs more bespoke in terms of your self-study. There'll be face-to-face and online sessions throughout the programme, and individual tutor support sessions to support with that. You'll also hear about reference to MITs or micro implementation tasks. They're to support you with the approach to leading improvement, and will help participants prepare for that final summative assessment that Helen alluded to on the last slide. Throughout the NPQ, the EEF stages of explore, prepare, deliver and sustain are all covered in full and introduced sequentially within each block. So it really gives participants that opportunity and to see how the implementation of professional development works as a structured process that's actively planned in terms of that practice, process and policy. With regards to subject development on the next slide, EDT have responded to surveys that teachers and head teachers have completed, who have said that they would like more subject-specific CPD. Obviously, this also links to what research is telling us, in that the highest quality learning materials are the ones that are underpinned by subject knowledge. So what EDT have done, they've responded to this request and they have added in 30 integrated digital handbooks that can be accessed via a link to enable participants to do their self-study within a specified subject. Where possible, colleagues will be able to take part in like a triad linked to their subject or phase or specialism, working with 2 other participants for support as well as on specific activities. And there will also be access to national specialist tutors from that you'll be signpost towards, which will include specialists from the curriculum hubs and subject associations to support with that learning. I think I'm handing over to Helen.
Thank you, Lisa. So a little bit of exemplification here of the time requirements within each of those elements that Lisa's just outlined as well. So what we're looking at here is the overview of the 3 specialist programs. All of them, as I've mentioned, 12 months for the actual program participation, then a 3-month period during which there's the opportunity to complete the summative assessment. The flexibility and the kind of the commitment in terms of workload and fixed events is much better designed in the new programs. So we're looking for the 3 specialists at just 2 face-to-face events over the course of those 12 months, a day at the start and a day at the end. Then there are 15 hours of webinars, some of which are live and a number of which are recorded. So again, the requirement to be out of school and away from pupils and young people is much less than previously. There is still that commitment in terms of the recorded webinars, the self-study online, and the connection and interaction with the tutor as well as the implementation, the micro implementation tasks too. But you can plan for that slightly more flexibly to meet the needs of your school timetables as well. So it is significantly more flexible for participants and the schools. Thanks, Amanda. So just to note here, the intended audience for each of the NPQs. So leading teacher development for those who have responsibility for leading the development of teachers. And you can see the reference there specifically to trainees or early career teachers as well. Leading teaching for those who have responsibilities for leading teaching in a subject, year group, key stage or phase. And leading behaviour and culture for those who have responsibility for leading behaviour and supporting pupil wellbeing in their schools. So you can see there that the specialist nature of the NPQs means that they are, they continue to be appropriate for senior teams as well as those new to middle leadership. For the leadership NPQs, again, we can see the breakdown here, those 18 months duration, all programs starting in November. So 18 months for participation in the leadership NPQs and then the same 3-month assessment window. Face-to-face training, slightly more. So there are 4 face-to-face events for the leadership NPQs and they're spread over that 18 months quite equally. The 5 live webinars and 10 hours of recorded webinars, again, supporting that flexibility. Quite a significant requirement of the online self-study, but again, that's spread over the 18-month period and can be planned for around existing commitments. And then there is slightly more in terms of the coaching for the executive leadership as well. But a total of 81 hours anticipated in terms of the time commitment for the leadership NPQs. Thanks, Amanda. And so this, this hasn't changed significantly in terms of intended audience. SL for those with senior leadership responsibilities, H for those who are or are aspiring to be head teacher or head of school, and EL for those who are or are aspiring to be an executive head or have a wider trust responsibility as well. So what we just wanted to draw out here were the key differences between the 3 specialist NPQ programs. So you can see the kind of intended audience, and we've just drawn out in bold there what the key differences are in the role and responsibility of the potential participants for the 3 specialist NPQs. So for leading teaching, that's those who manage a team of teachers, are supporting effective teaching across the school, and key themes will include curriculum assessment, professional development and implementation. For leading behaviour and culture, we're looking at those leaders who have responsibility for ensuring good behaviour and a culture of high expectation, those who might work with teams of class teachers or form tutors, for example, and looking at things such as behaviour systems, professional development and implementation as well. Leading teacher development, this is the one that's funded for all state schools. And again, there is that aspiration for all schools to have had somebody qualified. So if you're not thinking that the time is right for this year, do begin to bear in mind who might be appropriate for this training, either when the next cohorts are being recruited, which will be, I can't actually remember when, Amanda, when are we doing the second round of cohorts?
It's in February is when the actual cohort begins, but the recruitment for that will be just slightly before it.
Thank you. Thanks, Amanda. So you might be thinking about what that succession plan is in terms of future cohorts as well. So within all of those specialist NPQs, there will be content on teaching, school culture, professional development and implementation. But on the right-hand side there, you can see where the curriculum content differs for those participants in those 3 specialist NPQs. Thanks, Amanda. And then we just have a couple of slides here which give an exemplification of that leading teacher development. So you can see how the time commitment and the format of the learning, of the blended learning approaches works out over the course of the 12-month programme. And we've got a similar exemplification for all of the NPQs if you visit the Lead Teaching School Hub website. And we'll send you links to some of those documents after the session today as well. But you can see on there how within each block, and you can see how the blocks are mapped out over the course of the year, what the content is within each, and therefore what the commitment is that's required. And then on to the next one, please, Amanda. The main input within each of those. And again, if you're sort of undecided between some of those programs, it's worth drilling down, looking into these documents a little further to see what's the actual content of each of these NPQs and whether or not people are in the right roles with the right responsibilities in order to bring most value added for the participant and the school as well. So in relation to that, thanks, Amanda. Questions to consider for who are the most appropriate participants for each of these programs, what's in the current job description for your participants, what's in their performance review or wider strategic plans for professional development, what kind of leadership time, so the sponsorship, the mentoring, the support for that development, have you got capacity to do that in school? What's the member of staff going to gain individually from this, as well as what's going to be the impact on school improvement? And are there any kind of foundation stones or, pre-skills or experiences that participants need before they are going to be ready to embark on one of the programs? And again, in the links that you'll receive after this session, there is an example of the application form questions, because there are questions about the suitability of the participant to each of the programs. So worth preparing those responses in advance and making sure that the right choices have really been made about who's most appropriate for which program. Thanks, Amanda. And then just for the overall strategic considerations, do you have a plan over the next 2 to 3 years of your succession plan and the kind of roll on, roll off of participants on the different programs, so that within your school improvement capacity, you've got people who have got qualifications in all of these different areas? We know that we've got funding for all schools for leading teacher development this year, and for those schools in the top 30th percentile for pupil premium for all of the NPQs. We don't know whether there will be expansion or reduction of that funding over time. So how can that be maximised for your school this year and next? What do you do about identifying talent for NPQs? Do you offer it? Do people ask to participate, or is it actually part of a strategic plan and performance review and long-term school improvement planning? And so does your succession planning structure support that ongoing participation? Are you keeping that bank of expertise up to date all the time? Thanks, Amanda. Just a mention of the additional support offer for new head teachers. So this is part of the new national professional qualifications. It's an entitlement for all head teachers in their first 2 years of headship, which that can be completed alongside, before or after doing NPQH. Participants do need to be employed by the school which they are head of school or head teacher of at the start of the additional support offer, and there'll be entry points throughout the year, so it doesn't matter when a head teacher is taking up a post, because there'll be flexibility in when that can begin. And that will include applying the NPQH knowledge and skills to your own school context, building a support network of colleagues in a similar position to you, and learning about how to sustain yourself in the role of headship using social and psychological resources for leadership as well. So this will be delivered through a community of practice approach with 10 meetings over the course of the year, and opportunity for additional coaching and peer review as well. And applications for this need to be made directly to Education Development Trust. This is the programme which doesn't require the DFE application process in the same way as the others. Thanks, Amanda. Over to you.
Thank you, Helen. So on to the all-important aspect of funding. As you can see there is funding available for every school to access the Leading Teacher Development Programme. There is also funding available for NPQH, and there is, you have to be in your first 2 years of headship to enable you to access that. And then you have to pay for all other NPQs. Now, I know this is under review in terms of the DFE, and I would say watch this space in terms of funding, but the current point in time is, as you can see on your screen. Now, for those schools who fall into the top 30th centile, they get, for pupil premium data, they get all the NPQs fully funded by the DFE. And as you can see, you can be aspiring to be a head teacher to be able to access that NPQH programme in that. So you can see there, there is a range of funding available, and that Leading Teacher Development, I think, is quite interesting that that's been funded, because it seems to feed into the kind of Ofsted update and the Ofsted framework, in which early career teachers will be part of the focus of an inspection. So it's interesting that they have funded this, that seems to marry up with actually how are you supporting those early career teachers, and how are you developing, your staff in terms of that kind of teacher development, mentoring and coaching approach. So you can see the costs of the NPQs on your screen there, for if you are having to fund that as a setting yourself. So that's just, if there are any specific questions about the funding, and to know whether you're in the top 30th centile, you can check that yourself, and we'll give you the link in the chat in a moment to be able to check that for yourselves independently, or we're happy to contact any of us to look at that for you. So just to quickly point out, and I think Helen's already covered this really, that the whole sort of fundamental approach to NPQs covers all of these elements that you can see on the screen. I think it's really important to recognise that bottom strand there, that it's prioritised by school leadership, because embarking upon an NPQ, there has to be that recognition of support of time available for you to engage with the programme. And the great thing about this new kind of landscape of NPQs is the flexibility in the programme. So being able to access the reading, being able to access the various, modules, you can do that in more of a flexible way than you might have been able to previously. So I'm going to move on to the application process. I'm going to hand over to Lisa Cassidy.
Thank you. Previously, colleagues were asked to register their interest in the NPQs with EDT. That's no longer the case. You can go straight to registration with the DFE, as you see on the right-hand side. Once you register with the DFE, you will be asked at this point for your teacher reference number, what funding source you're going to use, whether you're accessing the scholarship or whether you're self-funded or school-funded. Obviously, you'll need to state which NPQ you're applying for, and at this point, you need to choose EDT as your lead provider. The deadline for the applications is October the 17th, as you can see on the screen, so just under 2 weeks now. From that point, the DFE will forward your application through to the Education Development Trust, and colleagues need to look out for an email from them, as you can see on the screen. Check your junk box as well, because some have been going into there to complete the next part of the process. So if we can go on to the next screen. So when you go through the DFE portal, as I've said, you need your teacher reference number, funding source, chosen programme. That will then take you through to the right hand of the screen, and you will be sent an application form from EDT, which will ask for the details that you can see on the screen. So it'll ask for your personal and professional details, sponsor details. Obviously, you need to have somebody sponsoring you to be able to complete the programme. And then there will be questions that will outline whether you've chosen the right course, for example, in terms of what it is you're actually looking for in terms of your eligibility and suitability. At this point, you need to select Lead Teaching School Hub as the provider. And once that's completed, that will go through the system. And if you've been validated and there's a match, which most are, then you will hear directly from EDT. We just go on to the next slide. We've included this just to ask for a little bit of patience, if you like, with regards to this process. There are 2 portals that we are having to work with, one being the DFE, one being the EDT portal. There's a lot going on behind the scenes, as you can see on the screen. Once you press submit, there are processes and systems that need to take place before you actually hear the other end as to whether you're on the programme or not. Just bear with us on that. It is getting quicker, but if you haven't heard from us or from anybody for some time, then just get in touch, because it might be that your applications got stuck in the system somewhere, and then we can do things our end to sort of push that along a little bit. So it's a little bit bumpy, but as it is with anything that's new, but bear with us, and we will do our best to increase the pace as much as we can. In terms of quality assurance, I think most of you know by now that all lead providers had to go through a really stringent process with the DFE, which they would, when they put in a bid to be able to deliver the NPQs. From there, we as a local, as a county, partners worked with all the lead providers that were available and did our own quality assurance, which we felt was very rigorous and robust in terms of finding the best lead provider for our county. And obviously that's the Education Development Trust. That's not to say then that that's it. We have our own quality assurance process in place, which will ensure that throughout the programs that are delivered, there will be a 3-tier model of quality assurance. Delivery partners, facilitators will QA each other as part of tier 1. Tier 2, we will have a QA team, if you like, that we will recruit, who will also quality assure the program and its delivery. And then we have partnered with other teaching school hubs across the UK, and we will do our QA out of county with other teaching school hubs to make sure that what it is we're delivering in Lincolnshire is on a par with what other counties are achieving. I think I'm handing over to Helen.
Thanks, Lisa. Okay, so just a mention of legacy NPQ. So considering for a moment those colleagues who have already completed a national professional qualification under the previous frameworks, or who might have completed the programme but not yet submitted their final assessment. So whilst all of the NPQ frameworks have been revised and refreshed, any completed on the previous framework remain a valid qualification and award. But we do want to highlight that if colleagues have completed the participation of the programme but haven't yet completed their final assessment, they do need to be doing so fairly immediately. So all final assessments do need to be submitted within 18 months of commencing the programme. There might have been some deferrals, there are some in exceptional circumstances, but for every participant who has not yet completed their final assessment, they must submit that in the at least by the final assessment window in March 2022. So every final assessment needs to have been submitted, assessed and moderated by the end of August 2022, which is why those submissions do need to be made by the end of March 2022, because then there's time for technical checks and appeals and things if that's necessary. All participants should be really well aware of what's required and what the timescales are, etc. But if you have any queries at all, please do contact your current provider and they should be able to make that really clear for you. Thanks, Amanda.
Thank you. Okay, just to finish really, there are a few key messages. So one of the key messages obviously is about funding available. We don't know how long that'll last. So in terms of ensuring that you maximise the use of that, now's the opportunity. The future expectation, as we said, potentially in having somebody with that leading teacher development qualification within your setting. Ensuring that, you know, the specialist aspects of development are pursued, I guess, where you've got somebody who's really strong in that kind of behaviour and culture aspect, that they have that qualification that underpins that. And I think obviously, as it says there, the sign up by the 17th of October. One thing I want to point out about the application process, however, for those of you that are going through that or considering, you know, applying, you can apply now and tick the box that you say that says you want to be part of the February cohort. So it's okay to get that application done and dusted and, you know, processed now, but actually for a later point. So I just want to make you aware of that in case for whatever reason that's the option that you wanted to pursue. And finally, it's just worth having the opportunity, really, as we've got a few moments, if there are any questions or any elements. I appreciate it's overwhelming when you're faced with all of that information in one go. If there are any questions that you might have about specific aspects of the programme or any of the elements raised, you know, please do unmute your microphone or pop it in the chat or stay on afterwards. And I think, you know, a huge thank you for attending, especially at lunchtime, as I said at the beginning, your commitment to finding out more. We would really, really appreciate, as the deadline is so tight, if you have any other colleagues in the system that you communicate, or any other schools that you work with in Lincolnshire, just sort of spreading the word that this funding is available now, and to sort of seize that opportunity, really, we'd really appreciate that on our behalf. So if you've got any questions, do let us know, and if not, thank you for joining us today. I'll let the tumbleweed roll if no one's got any questions.